extremely good example. Metaphysics, of course, is at a higher level, and it's very important these days because of globalization, that a lot more metaphysical principles are at work in the world, things like non-locality. And icons are an extremely ancient example. Indeed, is theology. Theology is at the same level as metaphysics, and this is why philosophers raid the vocabulary of theology for words like God to use in their philosophy. But generally there is a duality between the logos and the graphe, the word and the picture in our civilization. And so the icon is an extreme example, a very sophisticated example of the graphe. So I want to look at just one or two points which I think are important. And one of them is Vladimir Solov'ëv's work on the open beauty of divine Sophia. He denied allogism. I don't know if he used that word, but allogism is in the sense of that emotions, mysticism, magic, all that side cannot be represented rationally. He denied that. He said that it could be for reason and justice, and he objected to at that time for the philosophers who weren't using reason and justice. And justice, of course, is at the higher level of reason. And in particular, he mentions, which I think is rather significant, the madness of God is wiser than men, from 1 Corinthians. In the English version, it is the foolishness of God is wiser than men. But he translated it, and as you know better than I, there are two different words in Russian for madness and foolishness. So I want to come back to that important statement later on. He also rejected negative theology and positivism, which, considering his time, he was in the middle of the positivist age, which didn't really begin until about 1840 and still continues today with great difficulty, because positivism means that you have to have power over the domain where you're controlling things like by law or science, technology. And so, for example, Hans Kelsen designed the United Nations based on positivism, which is a local mechanics, really, for a global situation. And we see in the world today how that the United Nations, as set out by positivism, is really inadequate. So compare that with this negation. Well, negation doesn't really exist in the universe. It's a human concept, and it comes from a closed world assumption. You make some assumption, and then negation is anything outside of that assumption. But really, negation is a special case of the open operator, which opens up everything. So if you compare Solov'ëv with Kazimir Malevich, who was of that school, what's happened there? It doesn't like that. trouble with it. I can't read the... Okay. There, I expect you know quite well his black icon, which he one good thing about being lame is you can sort of stick to point up there. In the traditional position for an icon in the home is just this black square. Well, really, he was in the mainstream because modernity in science and religion relies on the creation out of nothing, as put forward by St Augustine. So the principle really is that nothing comes from nothing. And this was what Solov'ëv was opposed to, because creation is not bottom up. It's top down. And apophatic theology is misrepresentative as negative, when in fact it's that wow, but it emerges from God, from heaven. It's not created from below. Well, now, that's the position. There are the three levels. Reality, where we have our senses, and what we perceive to be reality, lies between metaphysics and models. So models are a reduction of reality. And this is current science, current mainstream science. So instead of going down to models, we need to go up to metaphysics. And more recently, in the 20th century, there was the movement of process theology, process philosophy by people like Whitehead, Alfred North Whitehead. They advocated speculative philosophy using metaphysics. And that really is where the icon comes in, because it emerges from metaphysics. As Eugene says, it's like royalty. You let the icons speak first. Well, now if we look at the logic side of things, we need more recent mathematics to represent it, because it's got to be metaphysics, not physics. So this is from category theory, which brings together algebra, geometry, and topology. What's going on there is this is a jointness. So this is a universal relationship between any two entities in the world, in physics or metaphysics. Any system, physical system, social system, they've all got to hang together. So this means that there can only be one law that relates them all, and all the laws that we know about, learn about, are really special cases of that one law. So this is a jointness, and it involves a free will functor and an underlying functor which gives you the rules. So if you've got two systems, they're locked in together, they snap in together, and it's a three-level relationship which connects them. Pardon?
Can I make it bigger on the screen?
Yes, please. Well, yes, it doesn't really matter that the things on that you can't read. So there's a free functor and a co-free functor, which relates the two systems. If we analyse that, I don't know if we can really got time to do it in full, but what's happening is, if you've got a system, which is that category there with an arrow to define process, a category in the sense of Aristotle would recognise, and if you've got something going on in that category, represented by that arrow, some process, it relates across at a higher level to another system. Now, strictly speaking, this is only one system going on. It's doing it on itself, but it's easier to see it with two separate systems. So that arrow goes across and back. So this arrow is mapped across by this free functor to this arrow over here. And this arrow maps back this one to that one. And the important point is that is a unique relationship. Given any two of them, so you take this system and that arrow, in other words, that you're a system, you've got a free choice. You end up with this system here, and that arrow is only one unique solution. That's why the universe hangs together. It's all got to connect. It's all got to fit. Otherwise, there would be no existence. And in particular, you have to have a terminal object. Otherwise, you can't have anything existent. Well, it goes on again. If you take another one, that goes across and back again. That one goes across and back again. And that is the end of the matter. That gives you everything. And that gives you closure at that top level. Now what happens is that those triangles are unique. And there's the same on this side. And what's happening is you're moving that process across here and it ends up back there. In other words, you've moved this system on from there to there. That is the unit of a junction. That is, it tells you the relation, it characterizes the relationship between those two systems. Now, should go on to the whole lot, you see. So there is, in fact, a unit of a junction. This is all the same unit of a junction that's moving this system on. And this one is the co-unit of a junction. Now this one, going around this way, the unit of a junction gives you the logic, the dialectic. You start here and you go around this way, you get the rhetoric. So this is how dialectic and rhetoric are linked in together. And aesthetics, for example, is a co-unit of a junction. I've got a few more labels I could put in there. And this is called a monad. It's a single system made up of three components. These are GF, so GF. This is G, that's F. So G applied to F means you've applied an F, you applied this big F to this system, which takes you over here, and you then apply G to what you've got, so GF just means going down that way. That's all. FG would be going the other way, G first, followed by F, and that's what the area of the icon is. Now, let's look at adjointness. So that relationship of adjointness is between a unit of adjunction and a co-unit of adjunction. So let's have a look at some examples. Well, chaos would be a unit of adjunction. That is, you start off with some chaotic system over that side. And the co-unit would give you the cosmos, the ordering on the universe. Or, so as I said, the dialectic and the rhetoric. Or the logos and eros. Now, this is quite important, the eros. Because in Plato's world, the highest form of pure beauty is the expression of divine eroticism, which has got lost rather, in the same way as icons got lost because of the Judeo-Christian Old Testament, which is against the images. And so in the Judeo-Christian system, the highest form of love is agape. As you may know, that there are at least 8 different words for love in classical Greek. And the word agape, which is hardly found anywhere in classical Greek texts. It abounds, of course, in the New Testament. But the agape relates to mortality. Agape are the love feast, the Eucharist. They are of this world, mortality, whereas the eroticism is immortal. The 3 components of humans, the mortal, the immortal, and the mind. The immortal goes back to the foundation of the world. So, like our bodies are, we were there at the foundation of the world because all the elements in our bodies were there at, well, if you believe in a Big Bang or what the foundation of the world was, we were there, they were there, we were there. And eroticism is a component of that, pure eroticism, according to Plato. And so in Platonic Christianity, which I suppose Alexandria and Byzantium, the Second Rome, promoted, we get it from the Symposium. That's Socrates introducing a speech by Agathon in the Symposium, which is an interesting text there. The lover of good things, he loves. What does he love? Well, there is some question about that text, which illustrates an interesting point with logic, that there is an alternative reading with ero instead of era. And the interesting thing about ero is that it is the first person present indicative of ero, I love, but also it is the future first person of ero, which means I ask, I dispute, I question. And there is that connection between, it would appear there in Plato, and there's often so much play on words in Plato, it's very difficult to translate into any language. But that is quite an important example. And there we're talking about eroticism in Plato's sense. And that is really is what is in the nature of the icon. If I come back to that quotation, the madness of God is wiser than man. So in that sense, this is in erotic sense. So in God is madly in love with us, with mankind. It's a madness, but it's a madness which is more logical than normal human reasoning. And this is what is in the essence of the beauty of the mysticism of the icon. Now, really, to explore it further, you should consider the fact that you've got causation, you've got recursion, with contexts. So if you take Newton's laws, Newton's third law says that to every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. But that's only a very simplified version. Really, in the real world, it is any action in context, there is an equal and opposite reaction in context. And that makes it much, much more complicated because you've got to take into account the context, which may be just, even if it's just a local context, but really you're taking into account the whole of the universe. The reaction has got to all be right the way throughout the universe. And because of the free functor at the beginning there, the free will, we are creating the universe. So we are co-creators with God, because every decision we make affects the structure of the universe. If we decide to give up meat and become vegetarian, we affect the animal farmers and their markets. Well, now this is going on at three levels because of what I said earlier about the monad. So, in fact, if you look at this as perhaps causation, A causes B, or a logical inference, A implies B. That's never alone, as in Newton and the models, because there's always a context. So this represents all the other objects in the relevant universe. And so this implying that, you've got to take into account how that acts on here and how that acts on there. Not only at the level of the phenomenon you're concerned with, but at three levels. And if you look in the circles there, you've got three circles of the same at that level. And so these things don't go on infinitely. There's always just three levels. Good. Thank you. There's always the three levels. And that gives you the closure. And that really is what an icon is in beauty. With regard to this logism point, let me just end with this slide here. It's not easy to represent what's going on, but this is three levels. So this, take any entities in the world. There. Well, there's a relationship between each one. It's not just a simple relationship like that, because this one is also connected to that one, is connected to that one, this one is connected to this one, this one is connected like that. So those are the relationships in the world. Now, if you go up to the next level, all these relationships between the sort of foundation level, you've also got relationships between those. And you can go up to a higher level still, and you've got relationships between these. And this is the closure. This is what, and it's at this level here, these relationships which give you the mysticism. This is where the spiritual lies, because from that monad, the logic of the monad, and this is what is there emerging in the co-adjunction of that unit of that first earlier diagram. Thank you very much.